Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Leadership from the Heart. This episode is all about leaders passing the buck. I'm writing solo, so let's go ahead and jump right in. To me, as a leader, a true leader, you don't get to pass the buck. Think about the best leaders in sports, like Michael Jordan. What if MJ gave up the ball every time there was 3 seconds left in the game? As a Dolphin fan, I can say this now that he's retired, but picture the Patriots' record today if every fourth quarter with 1 minute left, Tom Brady subbed himself out. Leaders don't pass the buck. They take the buck and do whatever needs to be done. So where did this phrase passing the buck originate from anyway? I looked it up and it originated from a game of poker in the 19th century. In poker, a marker or a counter, often a knife with a buckhorn handle, hence the buck, was placed in front of the player to indicate who was the dealer. And so when the dealer's turn was over, they would pass the buck to the next player to signify that it was now their turn to deal. Over time, this phrase evolved into a metaphor for shifting responsibility to someone else. This meaning was popularized in broader context, signifying the act of actually avoiding accountability by transferring the duty or the blame to another person. So what does pass the buck look like in the real world? Let's say an employee comes to you for help and you send them somewhere else without either leading them there or making sure they actually got the help they needed. This one is a big one for me because anyone that walks into your office as a leader, you should, and they ask you for help, you should indeed get them the help they need or make sure they're led to the right person or they're communicating with the right person. They came to you for a reason. Think about when you ask for help at a store or you're on hold and how frustrating it feels to get bounced around from person to person to person. As a leader, the employee is your internal customer. For me, it stops with me. Anybody that walks into my office, they could walk into the building and they're asking for help. I will go out of my way to make sure that I get them the help they need because I understand that if they're asking for help, it takes so much for a person to ask for help. And that if they're actually asking for help, it's because they likely need it. Now, of course, you have the anomaly of the people who ask for help no matter what. That's not who I'm referring to. I'm referring to the everyday people that come to you because they know that either you can get them the help they need or that they trust that you will get them the help they need. Another example is when a leader specifically avoids completing a task by repeatedly delegating it to another leader, another employee, avoiding the blame for when things go wrong or if things go wrong. This behavior is often disguised as delegation, but it lacks so much ownership. And so if you find yourself giving up tasks because you're afraid of what may happen, then this is probably a reference for you to think about. When I encounter leaders who often pass the buck, I'm always questioning like why? Why do people want to pass off responsibility? And the only thing that I ever come back to is this one thing of fear. And it's the fear of being wrong, the fear of being blamed, or the fear of taking ownership and actually making a decision. And the theory goes for me that if you're not scared or you're not insecure about a thing, you automatically take the lead. You take the responsibility, you make the decision. Think about two instances in your life where you pass the buck and you take responsibility and try to find what the gap is there. In the fear, we put so much emphasis on being wrong as if it's the worst thing in the world. And while I understand where it comes from, because for me, being wrong often takes me back to the classroom, in elementary or middle school, where I was afraid to raise my hand in fear that I would be wrong and be made fun of. And most of us are no longer living in this trauma of adolescence at work. At least I hope we're not. And so you can bring yourself out of that fear and bring yourself into this real world and understand that your ego or your brain, whatever you want to conceptualize this theory, is protecting you, thinking that we're back in the classroom or we're back in danger. where our ego or our feelings may be hurt, but that's no longer true. Now, I say this, and in my line of work, I have found places where passing the buck is very prevalent because micromanaging and poor employee morale is also very prevalent, and it goes hand in hand because nobody wants to be screamed at by the micromanager. And so what I found in those environments is everybody passes the hot potato of responsibility, hoping that it never gets caught in their hands. And so if you're in this situation, I hope you find a way to make the best of it or get out as quickly as possible, because nobody should be in that environment. It's definitely not good for your nervous system. It's not good for your emotions. It's not good for long-term health. It's not good, period. And so with that, I want to preface this by saying that being wrong is a gift, because nobody educates the know-it-all, right? And so I admit that I'm wrong a lot. And if I hadn't taken the risk of now looking foolish and being wrong, I wouldn't have gained all the knowledge that I have today. Again, nobody ever wants to educate the know-it-all. And so responsibility is often tied to this spooky word that we all know as accountability. And for me, accountability gets a bad rap because of possible old leadership that used to, like, hold you accountable as if it was a bad thing. But the truth is that although they may have done it incorrectly and their approach was probably wrong, you likely hold yourself accountable all day long, and you are held accountable all day long. You're held accountable and hold yourself accountable at work, in your personal goals, at home with your household responsibilities, in relationship, etc. Right? So if you hold yourself accountable all day long anyway, you can be a buck stopper. And this doesn't mean that you involve yourself in everyone's business, but it means that you take responsibility in ensuring that the task is completed correctly. You ensure that the help is being provided. You ensure that you're following up if that's what needs to be done. Because the best leaders I know get it done. They just simply get it done. And being a buck stopper is a new phrase, of course. TM, just kidding. And so I want to encourage you to be the one that it ends with. So if somebody comes to you, it ends with you. It doesn't mean that you have this long list of tasks, but it means that you get better at being better. It means you get better at knowing the answer. Once you, what not passing the buck has done for me, and let me veer off here a little bit, it has opened my knowledge up into so many other things. So an employee comes to me and they ask me for something and I don't know the answer, but I'm willing to go get the answer for them, or I'm willing to go on this journey with this employee. I now know what the answer is. And so the next time that employee comes to me, I have knowledge to share, or I have an experience to share. And so it opens up this entire way or knowledge or whatever you want to call it into this whole new world that you never knew before, because everybody's so obsessed with staying in their lane. And while you should stay in your lane as far as assigning responsibility and assigning task and staying in your lane as far as your department, when somebody comes to you for help, it is now your opportunity to open it up and uncover new knowledge, is the way I see it. And so of course, I want to provide you guys with practical steps to start taking responsibility. And these are no surprises. They're the simple 10 pillars that always make a great leader. But I want to reemphasize it because I think that this is coming from a different angle. And it feels a little bit lighter in this. So the first is to acknowledge responsibility. Recognize and accept that as a leader, you are accountable for your team's performance and the outcomes of those performances. So own your decisions and actions, both good and bad. Number 2, set clear expectations. Clearly communicate roles, responsibilities, and expectations to your team. When everyone understands their duties, it's so much easier for you to take responsibility in your part of guiding and supporting them. Number 3, lead by example. Demonstrate accountability by admitting your mistakes and learning from them. Show your team that taking responsibility is a strength and not a weakness. Number 4, provide support and resources. Ensure that your team has the necessary tools, training, and resources to complete their task. And if something does go wrong, review whether you provided adequate support to what they needed. And if you didn't, that's okay. You can learn from that. Number 5, encourage open communication. Create an environment where team members feel comfortable with sharing their concerns, their ideas, and feedback. Listen actively and address issues promptly. Don't let things fester. Number 6, reflect on your decisions. We went over this a little bit already. Before making a decision, consider the potential outcomes and your role in those outcomes. Be prepared to stand by your choice and manage the consequences. Number 7, avoid the blame. This is a big one. When problems arise, focus on finding solutions rather than assigning blame. Collaborate with your team to identify the root cause and implement the corrective actions. Remember that fixing the problem, finding the solution is the goal. You can do a root cause analysis with your team afterwards, but fix the problem, then you do a root cause analysis, and then you can create the corrective action you can implement the corrective action that will stop the issue from happening ever again. Number 8, give credit where credit is due. It's a big one. Recognize and celebrate the contributions and success of your team. Sharing credit builds trust and demonstrates that you value their efforts, and that's big. If your team always thinks that you're going to take the credit, they will never do anything great because you'll always take the credit. And I say do this publicly. Don't just do this privately with your team. Make sure your leader knows, and make sure your leader's leader knows that your team is successful and where they do well, always. Number 9, seek feedback. Regularly ask for feedback from your teams, your peers, and mentors. Use this feedback to improve your leadership skills and address any tendencies to pass the buck. And number 10, commit to continuous improvement. Make accountability a part of your leadership development. Continuously work on improving your decision making, your communication, and your problem solving skills. And so continuous improvement, even for me as a leadership coach, I receive feedback all the time. The most recent feedback I received was that although I am a great multitasker, it takes away from being present. And so I heard, I recognized, I acknowledged, and it's true. I feel like I can get a lot done by doing multiple things at once, but it never gives anything 100% of my attention. And when somebody comes to me, although I can talk to them and likely fix their issue, I'm not giving them 100% of me. And that is what they're asking for. And so I am making it a point to change my paradigm and recognize that I can use my own skills of block out time and be able to give people 100% of my attention. So it's never ending. It is forever a learning opportunity for you as a leader. But I welcome it, and you should welcome it too, because it means nothing about you other than, what you were good at before, did well, and now you get to adjust, and that's it. It's just data. Remember, it's just data. And so remember that the best leaders are those who get it done by taking responsibility and empowering their team. Thanks again for tuning in to this episode of Leadership from the Heart. And until next time, lead with heart and stop passing the buck. See you next time. Peace.